Everyone. So my name is Madison. I am currently an SDR at Cognism. I started in April 2022. First sales job, so yeah, still relatively new. But yeah, it's definitely been a journey to get here. So I've really enjoyed everything I've done so far, and I've made a lot of new friends out of this whole business. So yeah, that's basically what my kind of sales story, so to speak. And also, as you can tell, I'm South African. But yeah, that's basically me to a T.
I love it. I love it. And this is interesting because most people think that the South African accent sometimes can be the London accent, and that can be people are like, oh, I think that's like no, it's not. They're different. So I'm glad you
Yep.
clarified that because people could get lost real quick. And I start off as an SDR as well, so great place to start. But what we're here for is your confession. So Madison, walk us through your SDR confession.
Well, I'm going to have a lot of people look at me and say, Madison, what were you thinking? But so basically, in a nutshell, what happened from the get go was I had two different companies that I was kind of in conversations with. And the two decision makers that I was chatting to from the one company was Mark Williams, and from the other company, there was Marcus Williams. So I had spoken to Mark, and Mark didn't want a demo, but he wanted me to reach out at a different stage. Then I had spoken to Marcus, and he wanted a demo there and then as I was on the phone with him. But so obviously I went on, tried to book the meeting with him, sent it to his email. I was like, oh, okay, cool. Mark Williams, there we go. Not kind of, thinking anything of it. I wait like a couple of days, still like not accepting the invite,
Mhm.
not getting back to me, not emailing me back. Every time I emailed him, I was like, "Hi, did you get my invite?" Kind of following up with everything, and then no response. So I was just like, "Okay, cool, non-attended meeting. This guy's ghosted me. It happens." Then I go on to the invitation, and I'm just like looking through everything. And I just realized I have sent the invitation to the guy who didn't want the demo. And and I had mixed up the two names the whole entire time. So I'm busy emailing this guy who
Yeah.
didn't want the demo at all. Meanwhile, the guy who wanted the demo is busy sitting there like, okay, where's my invitation? I'm not receiving it.
Yeah, what's happening?
So eventually I ended up, calling the right guy. I was like, I'm so sorry, I sent it to the wrong email, etc., etc. I ended up booking him in at the end, but that could have been an absolute disaster if the guy wasn't nice about it. So yeah, that's basically what happened. And the guy who didn't want the demo, even though he told me to follow up with him in the end, I tried to, but no response, and I can imagine why. So yeah, that's
Wow.
basically what happened to me.
Wow. That is an
Yeah.
emotional roller coaster. I don't know about y'all, but I felt like went on an emotional roller coaster of like, okay, I think we're gonna get this person, the wrong person, right? We're all
Yeah.
over the place. Craziness. So there's a lot of things to learn from that. I think the first thing is attention to detail, right? Making sure that, okay, like, is the person I'm reaching out to, is that correct? Taking the right notes. So I'm curious on your perspective, since this whole roller coaster you went through, what have you learned about attention to detail? Have you changed your process since then?
Yes, definitely. So, my process so basically beforehand, we had like these cadences that we would obviously put prospects into and things like that. So I think this happened I think it was August last year.
Mhm.
So, yeah, basically at that stage, I was kind of just looking for a volume of meetings. So I was kind of going through my prospect list and just calling all random numbers, seeing like who I could speak to, who I could get a conversation with. And that's basically how my process was going. So it was very disorganized, very, kind of getting through a volume of calls rather than
Mhm.
getting quality. So um, from then on, I started using my cadences more often and realizing kind of the importance of it, because the cadences are what keep track of who you're speaking to, when you're speaking to them, what company they're from, instead of just calling a bunch of mobiles. So I would say definitely cadences. So like, let's say using outreach or sales loft, the
Yep.
cadences are probably the most important part out of all of that. Yeah.
And within that, you have these cadences. You've set it up a certain way. How have you made sure to like make sure you complete your task within those cadences as well and not feel rushed? I feel like a lot. I mean, I've done this as well when I was an SDR. I'm like, oh, I have 60 emails to send out. Let me just rush through it. How do you make sure
I've
that you're
done
being
that
more thought?
before.
Oh yeah, we all have. How do we then make sure that you're more thoughtful?
So the thing about cadences is that, especially the ones that we use, so obviously there's like, ones that you can personalize more than like the more generic ones.
Mm,
So there was separate cadences, like for example, a sales leader cadence where it had just a basic kind of email. But we've kind of introduced these other cadences that have more personalized emails. So even though you have like 60 emails to send out, it's not as generic because there's a lot of filling in to do. So I would say definitely it depends on the structure of the email and making the emails more personal. Instead of just having one generic email you sending out to everyone. Because if you're personalizing the email more often, you are paying much more attention to the prospect and their business and what their needs are and what their wants are.
mm.
If that makes sense.
No, it does. It does. I think what's important is that you're finding a process to personalize without it overwhelming you. I think a lot of people when
Yeah.
they think about personalizing, it's like, okay, this is gonna take a lot of time. I got a lot of things I gotta go do. Like it becomes like ultimately very overwhelming for that person. And so I like the way that you have that fleshed out. And it kind of goes into like the next piece, which is okay, now you have a process, you have your things in order. You also said that, hey, throughout this whole mistake, you took accountability on that. So how important is it to take accountability for the mistakes you make as an SDR? We all are human, we've all made mistakes across the board, but how have you made sure to do that as
Yeah.
well?
So my manager knows a lot about this one. But, the thing about me is I'm a perfectionist, especially when it comes to making mistakes and stuff like that. I don't really take
Mm,
it lightly. I immediately go to my performance and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm terrible at my job. I made this mistake, I made that mistake, whatever. And then my manager will come to me and be like, look, it happens. You made a mistake, whatever. You move on from it. So I feel like he helped me a lot in that department to take kind of. I would take accountability, but I would take accountability to the point where I would actually drag myself down and drag my confidence down because of one mistake I'd made. So I think, regardless of taking accountability, I think the important thing is to take accountability, but like learn from it and then move on instead of just saying, okay, I'm terrible at my job, I'm going to give up type of thing. So that's literally the mindset of being an SDR. I mean, there's certain people, like for example, me, who I was like new to sales at the beginning,
mm,
and like for example, when you were in school, you'd make a mistake and it would affect your grades, and then it'd affect your future, and then it would affect this and
yeah.
that. But the thing about sales is that if you make a mistake, it's not going to affect absolutely everything. Every single day is different. So if you make one mistake, you learn the lesson, you move on, try not to do it again, type of thing. So I would say take accountability for the mistake, but don't drag yourself down about it and destroy your confidence in the job as a whole.
Yeah, let's go more into that. How do you make sure to not drag it down for you?
I would say it's just like it's a mindset, really. I mean, it
Mm,
also all depends on. I mean, obviously, your managers and your peers and stuff are going to lift you up and hype you up and say,
yeah.
don't drag yourself down, type of thing. But you're the only one that needs to make that mindset and make that kind of mental note that not every single mistake you make is going to be the end of the world. I mean, none of them are actually. So I think it's all about mindset and all about, if you are doing the right things, if you are, getting your tasks done, if you are learning from the mistakes you're making, if you're doing everything you can to kind of overcome all the downfalls you have, then there's nothing really to um, drag yourself down about because you're trying your best in every single aspect. Um, so I would say, as long as you're doing everything and you're committed to your job and you're doing everything that you're supposed to and you make fun out of, like you have fun with it,
Mm.
then I would definitely say there's no point in dragging yourself down because you're trying your best. What else can you do? And obviously the job's not for everyone.
No,
but you
it's
know,
definitely
you
not.
grow. I didn't know at the beginning, to be fair, but I grew a really thick skin from it, and now I can't think of a single day I haven't enjoyed it. So
Yeah.
it takes time and lessons and learning and everything. I mean, take it from someone who started from scratch. Um, but you grow a thick skin, you learn along the way, and there's definitely light at the end of every single mistake or hiccup you may have in the job.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I was expecting to say like, well, you know, I meditate at the end of the day and I let fan everything out. But no,
To be
everyone's
fair,
everyone's
I just nap. I just nap. I just go to sleep. I'm like, tomorrow's another day. I go to sleep. I wake up with a fresh mind, and that's it.
I think I like that because I think everyone has a different way of doing that and moving past like, okay, I made a mistake. I can move on. And to your point, I tell people that all the time. Like, if you make a mistake as an SDR, like no one is coming to your house and being like, hey, you know what? Like you made a mistake. Like you got to go. You're not able to be here anymore. Like you
Yep.
learn from those mistakes. And I think it's absolutely critical, which kind of leads into our next point because you were following up with this person and they weren't engaging, right? They weren't
Mm.
responding. So there could have been like certain things that we could have done here to get them respond earlier. So now that you look back at the scenario, you've been in the role for a while. Are there things that you do that you could share with other SDRs that are listening in on what type of emails are you writing to get people to respond when maybe they're not the right person or they're just not responding at all?
Mm. So I actually took a bit of a risk like a couple months ago, and I got a really
Uh-oh.
good response from it. And I think I was on LinkedIn, and I like took inspiration from someone. I can't remember who it was, but I saw someone about talking about emails and stuff like that. First of all, I mean, when I'm on a call, the accent does the work, if I'm being completely honest. But um, I'm being like completely honest, and it's all
I
about
get that.
tonality on a call.
Yep.
But with regards to emails, for example, so I think finding a structure of an email that completely suits you and gets you the best respond rates is definitely the way to go. In my case, um, I wrote a personalized email like a couple of months ago, and I've been using it ever since. I research the company and I see who their competitor is, and then if their competitor is a client of ours, that's even better because
Yeah.
then you can you could draw from that and say how they are benefiting and how their competitor is benefiting, and therefore they can benefit from it, type of thing. So I search who the competitor is and then kind of put it in the title of the email. So I'll
Mm-hmm.
say something about the person that I'm reaching out to and the competitor in the subject line. So that kind of catches the decision maker's
Mm.
attention because they're like, why are they mentioning my competitor with my name? That'll
Yeah.
make them click into it. And then in the body of the email, I'll say something about the company that I'm reaching out to. I know that ABC company um, has a better something than DFG, whatever. So I'll say, I don't know if this is making sense, but how their company differs from their competitor and
Mm-hmm.
how they have a benefit over their competitor. So what they do better than their competitor. That also catches their attention. They're like, okay, cool. Yeah, we do that better than our competitor.
Mm-hmm.
And then kind of go into the body and say, for example, however, your competitor is doing this and they are generating more business through this, and then kind of wiggle my way into how Cognism can fit into their processes and make them do just as good as the competitor. It's a
Okay.
different way of structuring it, but that was one of the emails that I got the best response rate with because people see their competitor's name. They're like, okay,
What's up?
caught my
Yeah.
attention. What's going on here?
Yeah.
And I think the most important thing is getting them to open it and read it. And then if they've done that and there's no use case, then fair enough. But I mean, if they've read that by the end and there's apps and there's interest, there you go. You got yourself a meeting. So
I love that. So some clarifying questions so people can follow along and do this tactic. So one thing you
mm,
mentioned was it's not your competitor, it's their competitor, to clarify that.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
then
So it's their
and then
competitor.
Okay, and then if it's their competitor, are they using Cognism already, or
It
you're
would
like
be
just
great
okay,
if they
okay,
were.
okay,
If they were
okay,
using Cognism, that would be fab.
okay.
However, we do have a lot of information on companies. So, like, I'll do research into the competitor, what tools their competitor is using, and then kind of structure it in such a way that I can kind of differentiate what their competitor is doing better at than them. It does take a lot of research, but I think my response rate's literally been like 100% the entire time.
100%. Hey,
Also,
look,
on the side,
why?
memes. I mean, memes and GIFs, best response rate ever.
How do
But
you make
yeah.
sure? How do you make sure you're like? How do you decide which means or gifts or gifs you're sending? I feel like that could be amazing, or it could be like a disaster if you send something that's like,
Mm,
whoa. Like, I'm so curious on this.
yeah. I I actually have a generic GIF that I send out, and majority of the time it does get me a response. I don't know if you've ever watched Mr. Bean,
I have.
but
Shout out to
and
Mr. Bean.
have you watched the movie?
I haven't watched the movie. I've just watched like
Yeah.
the shorts, like the couple of the shows. Yeah.
Yeah, so basically, Mr. Bean's quite like, generic British comedy that's all over the world. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, I used to watch it in South Africa. So I'll like send a voice note on LinkedIn because obviously it's more personable.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the time, I'll use memes and GIFs on LinkedIn. Um, as well as in an email. But I'll send a voice note on LinkedIn, and then if they read it or they don't reply within a couple of days, I'll send a GIF, which is Mr. Bean standing on a freeway, looking at his watch, like checking the time, like looking around type of
That
thing.
one's funny.
Yeah, so I send that, and I actually got a really good response rate the one time. The one guy replied and he was like, "Oh my gosh, the Mr. Bean gif was such a nice touch because my nickname in the office is actually Mr. Bean."
Oh, you
I
nailed it.
was like, wow, what are the chances?
You nailed it.
So worked out in my favor. And then in the other memes and like emails and stuff, I've got an email that has like a kitten in a mask, like a lion mask, and then an actual lion picture. And then it's like your data without Cognism, your data with Cognism. And it's like the lion and the kitten. And that gets quite a good response rate as well.
I love that. So hopefully y'all wrote that down. You got a competitor email, you got some gifts or gifs or whatever you like to call it, and you got some
Yeah.
memes. So
Yeah.
incredible insight. Has this ever gone bad for you before I move into like the final parts of this whole entire thing?
I did have one kind of tactic that I tried to use the one time that one of my SDRs in the office, kind of suggested as a way to reach out. And it was going onto the company's website
Yeah.
and like kind of doing some computer wizard stuff and editing the web page to make it say something. So, for example, hey, Sean, want your SDRs to make more cold calls. Let's chat, whatever. Putting that on the website. So, like editing the website to make it look like
Yeah.
whatever, and then sending the picture through LinkedIn and saying, hey, Sean, something looks off with your website. And then send that through. And then on the website, it says, want your SDRs to cold call more often.
Yeah.
Give them the pitch in the picture. So I tried that the one time, and I sent it to this one man,
Uh-oh.
and he replies, I almost had a lawsuit against me. He was like, how dare you? This must be illegal somehow. How, like, don't use our hard work websites as a way to pitch. Da, 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 da. Like, full on went off at me. And I was just like, whoops, I shouldn't have done that. He like it was bad. So I ended up just replying. I was like, I'm so sorry. I was just trying to try a unique way of reaching out.
Yep.
I do apologize, whatever. I never responded and blocked me on LinkedIn. So yeah.
Wow. Wow. Oh, that's crazy. People do get agitated. You try to be creative, and then they're like, well, that's too creative. Stop. It's so hey,
Yeah.
not everyone knows what
well,
not to do, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's go ahead.
I mean, it did get a few good responses, like the SDR who kind of suggested to us to try. He got a really good response with it. He was like, oh my gosh, so clever. Let's book a meeting. And then it just went wrong for me. So I guess it completely depends on the type of person. It's kind of like, it's hit or miss situation, because it completely
Yep.
depends on the person you're working with. They could be, you know, horrible and mean, or they could be, oh my gosh, that's so clever.
Yeah.
Let's do
Greatest thing I've
it.
ever seen. Yeah, you don't know. That's why it's important to
Yeah.
test, which leads into something you mentioned earlier, because I'm curious, you're doing things that are out of the box creative, but you also said that you were a perfectionist. So how did you get past being a perfectionist and doing these certain tactics? Because a lot of people out here probably are like, well, it has to be perfect. And a lot of these are like, oh, whatever, we'll see if it works. So how did you get past that?
Well, I think the thing is that, like, when I was doing generic things, because I was like, okay, cool, you know, this probably works. Let me just stick to this. It'll work perfectly, type of thing. When I wasn't getting responses and I wasn't getting meetings, I had to look at it and I was like, okay, why am I not getting responses? Why am I not getting
Hmm.
meetings? It's because I'm probably not thinking out the box, and I'm just like sending through generic things. So I think it's more of a fact that being a perfectionist kind of helped in that situation, because although I was happy with what I was doing, it wasn't working perfectly.
Yep.
So I kind of had to look and I'd say, okay, let me try this. Like I tried the whole website scenario, and that guy basically wanted to sue me. Um, I had to look at that and I was like, okay, that didn't work. Never did it again.
Yeah.
So I guess it's kind of, you know, trial and error. You stick to what works, and then, I mean, what's good for you, what you're good at. And for me, if I get a bad response, like 5% of the time, but get a good response 95% of the time,
Yeah.
I'll just keep that process in place, because, I mean, chances are that 5% that were being horrible are just moody people and had a bad day.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Yeah,
yeah.
100%. You're dealing with people, right? At the end of the day, I always tell people
Mm,
that, and you're absolutely spot on. Like sometimes you're going to catch someone in a good mood. Sometimes you might catch them in a bad mood. Sometimes that has nothing to do with the technique that you did, right? It's just a part of the game. So
yeah.
that is something that everyone definitely needs to know. So we appreciate your confessions. Also on the perfection side, your mini confession. But this is the last question here in the interview, which is, if you were to provide some practical advice for all the other SDRs out there, especially ones that are just starting out, what would it be?
Um, Kind of coming off what we said, I would say be as creative as you possibly can with your outreach and have fun with it. So, because, you know, it is obviously a job, but I mean, it's it's there's no point in being in sales if you don't enjoy it.
Hmm.
So do it in a way that you can enjoy it in the most creative way that you possibly can. And if you start getting good responses from one sort of process that you enjoy doing, just stick to that and carry it out, and then you'll end up being really successful.
Awesome. Well,
Yeah.
Madison, thanks so much for spending time with me today, sharing your confessions. Is there any lasting shout outs or anything you want to say before we get out of here?
I would definitely love to shout out Cognism,
I know, I
only
love the
because I know, only because obviously they were my first sales job. I didn't go to university and went straight into sales, and they've taught me everything that I know. So I wouldn't be sitting here today if it wasn't for this company. So I'd love to shout out them and Dave, our sales director. He's lovely. And yeah, if you guys need contact data, let me know.
Awesome. Well, Madison, again, thank you so much. Hopefully, you enjoyed this episode. You took some notes. I know that I learned a couple things, new things as well. And I will see you all next time.